right, today on Deep Thoughts, we're going to talk about the self. And this title alone is bound to not appeal as much as some of the other ones. But what's unfortunate about that is it is really the one thing that is sort of, I think, completely out of touch for most people. And I think most listeners are not. And I don't mean to just throw out compliments, but if you can dig into what I'm saying in any one of these deep thoughts, I'm sure that self is something that you're well aware of. Obviously, I don't have any Freud 2.0 for you, but I'm going to take you through, I'm just going to riff on self, because sometimes you choose to be in self mode, and sometimes you're thrown into it due to life. I was an only child. I did have cousins and friends around, but when you're an only kid, you spend a lot of time with self, because kids got to go home at night. You don't get a chance to play with anybody else. And it was extremely healthy for me as a kid to get bored. And so when I got bored, I go to my mom and say, Mom, I'm bored. And she'd say, well, you need to find something to do. You got all these art supplies, figure out something to do. You got these toys, go in there and imagine something. And honestly, that was the difference between me being a slave and me being my own man. Just that little tiny difference in being raised. So there's all kinds of different ways we could approach self. And some of you are going to assume things that are going to be in this episode. And I want to throw at you, because there's no real value in just a big affirmation episode where it's like, you're right, this is how to handle your life. And so I'm going to try to give you some wisdom that I have discovered over the years. Some of it, implicitly given to me, some of it through sheer experiencing of growing up in a small town for at least half of my pre-adolescent life. And what a small town allows you to do is to see people get born, live, and turn into whatever they're going to turn into. And you get to see cause and effect. And because the brain can hold in its mind a population of a small town, the archetype of life just repeats itself over and over and over. People who worked hard did better. People who got lazy didn't work better. The high school sweethearts that go off and marry each other have one experience. The ones that go off and, trudge through life trying to find the right partner have a different experience. Those who went to college have one experience. Those who didn't go to college have one experience. And the reason I want to give you of why I think self is humongous for us is that it is my true belief that your ability to grasp reality and to sink your claws into it and control it according to your goals in life is directly proportional to your understanding of self. And being in my mid-40s, what's interesting is, your friends grow up with you and you meet new friends, and, you usually try to hang out with someone in your own age, unless you're trying to be a child and you hang out with people 20 years younger than you. You meet people that have reached an advanced age, let's just say 45 or over, and they have no idea who they are at all. And their lives reflect that they have no idea who they are. And I'll give you a real difference between the two. A person who knows who they are is engaged in life. They are engaged in something that is an ecosystem between them and reality. They put into reality as much as they take out of reality, because they want to exhaust this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be alive as they are today. Even if you believe in reincarnation or something like that, you're still this person right now with a first name and last name in this mortal coil that looks a particular way, with the family and friends that you have and the career opportunities that you have and the knowledge that you have and the opportunities to add more to that. And I find that the people who understand who they are typically the people on stage, metaphorically, entertaining the crowd. And those who have no idea who they are find themselves in the crowd with the complete lack of ability to perceive themselves on stage. They are consumers, they are users, they are sheep. They don't control their destiny. Typically, they have jobs that have nothing to do with their life. If you even ask them, look, I'll give you any job in the world, what job do you want? That's the person that goes, I don't know. I just do this. That's someone who doesn't know about self. They have no relationship with their inner core. And what I always try to say is, look, this universe has seen a lot of lives go through bodies, right? If there's a God, then God has seen a lot of human beings born. My goal in my life is to be unique, to try and do something that hasn't been done in a particular way that I'm doing it, such that it adds value to the universe. That again, I'm an aggregator, hopefully, of knowledge that's useful to some of you, and hopefully useful to myself and my closest family and friends. And so my goal is to aggregate and then turn on something, right? To bring together the metal and the heat and the craftsmanship and make something that's useful to society, that's useful to myself. And hopefully in the end blow some minds, make some people go, oh my gosh, that was amazing. That gets harder and harder as you get older because your goals and your next greatest thing, you want it to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and thus it becomes more difficult and more horrendously large, right? But I'll give you a little example of something I did for my neighbor just to blow a mind because I needed that feeling. I needed that contribution. I needed to give to the universe, and I needed the spirituality of the experience. This is Huntington Beach. We're one of the capitals of extreme sports. We're Surf City. We've actually sued all the other cities. They can't call themselves Surf City. So Santa Cruz, which barely has a beach, was using Surf City, which is kind of funny. But we have a skateboard capital going on here. And the kid across the street's a fantastic little tiny kid, 9 years old. And he's a great skateboarder. And he had a bunch of little kids. And they had this ugly-ass ramp that someone got off somebody else. And so every time I drive into my my driveway, this kid had this ugly-ass ramp out front. And I'm looking at it and thinking, man, I'm tired of looking at it. I can paint. I can design. So I sat outside smoking cigars, and this kid's like half Irish, half Mexican. So I said, let's do something really cool. Let's do like an Aztec theme, at least on the front ramp. On the sides, we can put all kinds of cool logos, and we did Black Sabbath and a bunch of other stuff, Beastie Boys. And I painted this mosaic of the Aztec calendar, but I tricked it out so it's all skateboard themes, right? It's really cool. Looks like old stone, being lit by some candle or something like that. But I got his ramp, and I did it. And it took me about a week and a half to pull it off. And, of course, 2 or 3 weeks of design and getting it approved by the kid. I just treated him like a client. I said, look, I'm working for you. And so he got to pick and choose all kinds of different types and stuff. So I put him in a professional capacity to see what I'm doing. I bring the ramp right here on this patio, and I line it up, and I do a projection of my sketch, and I trace everything up, and I just hand paint this thing, right, with like really intense house paints, right, external house paints. And when I was done, I rolled this thing out because it was kind of you got to see it a couple times, but after a while I closed the Willy Wonka curtain so you couldn't see it, so it'd be a good debut. And literally the paint is still drying on the sides as I'm painting the Beastie Boy logo. And he had all of his friends over, his whole family out, and they were doing a little barbecue out front. And then I said, it's time. And I opened the door, and it was just like I wheeled this ramp out there and down there and dropped it on the street, and people freaking out, and he's freaking out, and he's the most popular kid in town because he got the sexiest ramp in Huntington Beach. And they just killed this thing. I got all these photographs of them flying 10 feet in the air off this bad boy. But that was me doing a couple things. One, I have this need to give. I just do. So I feel like, you have to intentionally charge karma. You can't just wait around for it, right? You got to go get it, and you got to give. I thought, man, if I was 9 years old and some dude who's known me for like his whole life, but I mean, literally, I moved in before he was born. But I'm kind of a mystery to the kid, right? Because I don't go over and push my face into people. I know his parents fairly well, but I wanted him to have something special, and I wanted him to see that. And I told him, I said, look, when I gave it to him, I said, look, now here's the deal. I said, when you're my age, you do this for somebody else. Whatever you can do, you do it for somebody else. And he's like, deal, But when I was painting this thing for, days and days and days after work, I come home and just put the lights on. It's kind of cold outside, and I'm just painting this thing. And then the summer came around. It was beautiful. I went through this growth pattern in myself, this meditation of one, starting a goal that I wasn't quite sure how I was going to finish. It had to be amazing. It couldn't be just average. So I'm detailing this thing like crazy by hand, just painting this thing out. That was me going into self, but turning it into a positive thing. In one metaphorical way, I was on stage making this ramp, and I was, painting this ramp, and I was giving it to him. But I told him, in exchange, you got to get up back on stage when you're my age and give it to some other kid who's sitting in the audience. And at the same time, you'll be teaching the kid the process. And so he completely learned the process of painting a ramp, including weeks and weeks of designs beforehand. Well, little kids, they don't have any attention spans nowadays because of cell phones and a bunch of other stuff. So they're losing their self to, the distractions being satiated by a bunch of social media and everything on the internet. And most of us are hip to this, and we pound it to death on the show, that the internet is killing your brain. Not only is it filling your mind with bullshit, but it's also making sure that the little kid like me, when I was a little kid and I said, Mom, I'm bored. And if my mom had said, well, get on the internet, use your tablet, get on there, play a video game, man, I wouldn't have turned out the person I was. I would have never picked up a guitar. I would have never touched a computer. At least in the way that I made it my bitch, Like, I couldn't afford video games when I was a kid, so I wrote my own. I couldn't afford a synthesizer, so I wrote my own on my computer. Eventually, I saved up and bought one, but anything I couldn't afford, I did. I wanted a paint program. Well, they didn't have any, so I wrote one, with fonts and everything, right? So that stimulated my mind, and it was sort of a crude way for me to kind of meet myself. But at the time, I had no conception of self. And it wasn't until I went to high school and I took a class from a guy named Mr. Carl. So I remember he really pushed through on us the different elements of self, as dictated pretty much by Freud. I want to mention this because I think it's a huge, huge thing. And there's a lot of mental repercussions as a result of these states of being getting out of whack. Now, Freud, unfortunately, was obsessed with his mother, and so everything for him is an Oedipus complex. I mean, everything. He must have hated his mother, or hated his father and loved his mother. He must have wanted to sleep with his mother and kill his father, because every theory he ever had dovetails right into that mechanism, and all the psychologists after him have just leaned on this technique, and I think it's a little crazy, but I'm not going to go there. If you think of us like a multi-layered egg or an onion has a few too many layers. The egg is almost perfect. The yolk, the middle part, the white part, and then the shell. It's pretty good. In the center, we have the id, or the true self. It is also the ego. It is the most tender of your being. It is the most unguarded version of yourself. And I think a lot of us, including myself, struggle to get down close enough to our internal being to see really what's in the ego, to see what's really in the id. It is where all of the rage is inside man. It's where all the love is inside man. It's where the little boy still believes in Santa Claus. It's where the little boy fears the dark. It's everything that's irrational and childish, in my opinion. Around the id, you have the character. And I think this is just a beautiful breakdown of the whole thing. The character is sort of the area, if you're remotely in touch with yourself, it is the thing you have the most contact with. It is who you really think you are, consciously, right? And then you have this last layer, which is the persona. And this is how we act in front of people to be accepted into the tribe. And it can be totally genuine. If you ever meet me, I'm pretty much the same dude, Granted, I'll smile a little bit more out in public, but, the persona is that thing that is the gestation of everything that you are inside, but then you make yourself compatible with your grandmother and you don't swear. You hang out with your buddies and you drink a beer. You hang out with a lady and you hold the door. There's different layers of how you behave. You get it. Okay. So if I explain that to you and you go, yeah, I took psychology in either high school or college, and I get it. Well, then the next question is, my question for you is, how do you get in touch with that? How do you become intimately engaged with each layer of that? When you're out and about and you're using your persona, it's sort of a survival mechanism. And the more your persona is actually being either created on the fly, or let's just say you're using an artificial mask because you're with people that are very unlike you, but you like them, it's cool, but you're behaving in a particular way. You're really constraining that character, pushing through in its raw form. you tend to get exhausted when you meet somebody. I know that there's a lot of you that have clients, and you go out to meet your client. And you already have a great relationship. You got a business that's going back and forth, but you meet your client. And it's not your buddy from college. It's someone you truly met out of, thin air that's your client. And you meet with them. Used to do this all the time. And so you eat lunch for a couple hours, and then you get back in the car to go back to work. And you feel utterly, physically exhausted. And that's because you having to exude a tremendous amount of energy, spend energy in your body in order to masterfully craft who you are in front of this person. Because your belief system is that if you bring out your character, and you might be completely correct, and just let it fly, you're going to be in trouble. It might be that the day you go to visit your client, if you believe in chemtrails, the whole sky's covered in chemtrails. The guy says, man, I'm just coming down with this horrible cold. I don't know what it is, upper respiratory cold. And of course, you would look at the two together and you're like, well, that's what happens when these guys spray. You get this upper respiratory problem, usually not on the same day, but, you got to bite your lip. You can't say anything. And it takes energy to do that. It takes energy to curve who you would naturally be. That's just a tiny example of how difficult it can be to get in touch with yourself. And that's just the outer layer. Now, when you're at home and you're watching TV in your own house, and hopefully you don't have some tense relationship with someone where you can't be yourself. Some people marry people that they have to totally act the whole time. And man, I don't know how they do it. Hats off to you, man, if you can make it work. But once you're alone by yourself, and let's just say the people that make you tense are gone, your kids are gone, your wife is gone, or your husband's gone, and you're just sitting there staring at the TV, watching something that you want to watch, eating food that you want to eat. Guys, you got your hand down your pants. That's when you and your character can chill out together, and you can just enjoy what is you, right? I'm not saying you can't do this with your family. Hope to God you can do this with your family as well. You have an opportunity there to at least study who you are. How do you sit in a chair? What shows do you watch? What language do you speak? What language do you think? And I don't mean English or German. I just mean, how do you form words? How do you form thoughts? Are you critical of the world? Are you happy about the world? Are you critical but you're happy? The world's kind of screwed up, but it's all right. We'll make it through. Whatever that is, I'm going to encourage you from this video to at least, from time to time, as consciously as you possibly can, study what's going through your brain. Just do it every once in a while. You will expend energy monitoring the packets going through your brain, right? It's sort of like hanging out with someone in your persona monitoring, right? But again, the premise of this episode is to say, if you really want to control your universe, and it doesn't mean becoming an astronaut or something. You can take it that far if you want to. But just control your perception of self. You need to be directly in touch with these layers. And once you know exactly how you're behaving and exactly who you are, that management of your persona to the outside world can become increasingly genuine to your actual being. And even though you have to curb your words every once in a while, curb the subject matter, you can't say certain jokes, you can comfortably live in the pie slices of your personality, of your character and your id/ego, without really expending a lot of energy. So you feel comfortable all the time. And that's what every single human being deserves. A lot of people freak out about interviews. I talked about interviews. I've never felt the slightest bit nervous in an interview. I go in and I think, come on, I'm going to give you my all, and I got knowledge to bring you. I got a talent I'm going to bring you. Either it's my company that's going to provide a service, or it's me directly working for you if you're lucky enough. And I know you're amazing because you're in this position to interview me. And so we're just two people extremely happy in life. And they're obviously expanding if they're even interviewing anyone. So it's in a happy location in life. So I don't need to bring tension into the game. At the same time, I don't dress like this going to interviews. I manage my appearance. I manage the way I talk and way I walk. I get prepared for the interview before I go. I might even rehearse it and pretend like I'm them at home, asking myself questions, talking out loud, yes. And hear the words come out of my mouth that I like and keep those, and the ones I don't like I get rid of. So by the time I go in the interview, it's just a slam dunk. And I want that for every single one of you, not just with an interview, but with every engagement in life, because there's people out there that, they don't feel good in their own skin to some degree. And it could be something that you have something from childhood, which we're going to get into, that has plagued you your whole life and taken away part of the strength that you deserve. Or it could be that you were fine and you let yourself go. I know people that, have let their bodies go. They didn't mean to. Like I told everybody, I think on a previous episode, between the age of 30 and 40, I think a lot of us actually gain 1 pound permanently and we don't realize it. Now, it's not really permanent. You can get rid of it. But I arrived at, say, 43, 20 pounds overweight. If I was doing this episode 3 years ago, you wouldn't even recognize the dude in the camera. You'd be like, well, that's his fat brother. So when I talk about losing weight and stuff, I did it. I lost 20 pounds. Even that last 5 that sucks balls, right? I got rid of it, right? But it took me damn near, 2 times the amount of time to get rid of the first 15 is to get rid of the last 5. And so now I don't have a diet. I have a method of eating that's just logical. I don't overeat, right? I eat till I'm hungry and I stop eating. I'll just take the rest home and pound it. It's cool. So back to these layers of ourself. So persona, you most of the time feel, and I'm giving you the example of being stressed out with relatives and friends and professional colleagues, because that's when you really notice it. When you feel exhausted having been with someone, that's when you're feeling your persona and the management of your persona. When you're home alone by yourself or in your car and you're singing and screaming, completely out of tune or whatever, that's you and your character having fun. But everything in the universe has a force, has an original nucleus of force and vector, right? The direction in which you're thinking and going. Your id/ego directly in the center, which was formed at birth, which was largely constructed before you had a sentient thought, before you were able to remember your childhood. This bad boy was in a direction going in a certain place. Either fortunately or unfortunately for some of us, it was due to our parents or whomever raised us, right? It was due to our environment, whether or not we were stressed out our whole lives, whether or not we were in a peaceful place, whether or not we had good friends, whether or not someone hugged us or kissed us and said, you're an amazing kid. I really like you. You can be anything that you want. Some people had it, some people didn't. And that's why the world's a little wonky right now. One of the subtextual goals of Deep Thoughts is to hopefully make any one of you who end up being parents as utterly balanced as possible and wise to the universe, such that when you create offspring, even if you already have them, you're going to be able to manage your relationship with them in a way that is comforting and soothing. And even if you walk down that path and you get frustrated with life or them, or you just become a bad parent for a day or two or a year or two, that you're able to grab a hold of yourself and go, all right, let me just shake this out and let me go back in. I'm going to apologize to my kids in one way or another, and we're going to have a good time. Okay, so let's talk about the id and the ego. When you get older, you start to think, well, you're either lucky or you're not lucky about your childhood. And I'm hoping that most of the world's lucky, at least in modern Western world countries, right? And, sort of what you think is good is based on what you think the standards are in the universe. So you could be a kid in the slumdogs of India and know nothing different. And you could live a wonderful life. Something is just you're playing games every single day. Even though, maybe you don't have the chance to go to school, you still have that, I'm not, in trouble. I'm not in danger. You don't know anything about the dangers around you, and you don't know the kids around the world that have 10 times as much stuff as you. Doesn't mean they're happy. It just means they have a bunch of crap they probably don't need. In the Western world, hopefully they're able to, get as educated as possible about real science, about real history, about real life, the metaphysics between human beings. Hopefully they gain empathy over time and sympathy. But it doesn't always work out, does it? I have friends of mine who can't remember their childhood. And when I say they can't remember their childhood, they just simply have blacked out, just like MK Ultra, the real clandestine mental torturing program of the United States military, where they created these compartments in people's minds by torturing them. And when their brain goes back towards pain, their brain just goes, you're not going to be allowed to think these thoughts. And so they can't access them. And some people are really aware of it and they can tell you, and some people are unaware of it and they just kind of bottle up when you go back to who they are. You're just asking them questions about their life and they just simply don't have any answers for you at one point. I'm going to hope that you don't have that issue, but if you do, there's a lot you can do to reach in there and wipe it clean. You know, there's a lot of motivational speakers that are now in complete agreement that, you know, one of the worst things that we do as human beings is we let the past equal the future. And some people, again, are habitual victims because they're so lost in life. They're always looking for a prize, and they're taught this from Hollywood and television. And then it just spreads into modern culture where it goes something like this. And you've heard me say this once before, but we'll write on it, so I need to repeat it. If I can convince you that you've offended me, which is a ludicrous concept in the first place, then you have to give me a prize before I'm going to allow you in my circle again. This happens between spouses in relationships, boyfriend and girlfriend in relationships, where, you know, someone pisses somebody off and you have to literally take them out to dinner, rub their back, do whatever, take out the trash. You do all these things to kiss their ass to get back into good graces. And it's just reprehensible behavior on any level. Saying you're sorry for, you know, perhaps doing wrong to someone is a little bit different than being offended. But just remember, we as human beings are the most flawed mental creatures because we've taken on the responsibility to become these super intellectualized society people. It's like trying to pay your taxes properly without ever reading the tax code. That's really what it is. Once you try to be a civilized human being, there's low-hanging fruit that's super simple to get right, but then there's the tedious nature of combining two people's intellect, two people's massive array of preferences to either dislike something and keep it out of their life or love something and try to pull as much in as you possibly can. And so it is this unwritten tax code of how to behave that we're never sent a pamphlet on. We barely know who we are as individuals. And some of these habitual victims love to blame the other people for not knowing who they are either. And so it's like, if to the degree you want to be a victim constantly of everyone else's behavior, you better be able to sit down across the table from me and give me soup to nuts, A to Z description of who you are as a human being, so I even have a chance of getting this thing right with you. And to the degree you have no idea who you are, sit down, be quiet, figure out who you are, and once you figure it out, then open your mouth and share it with me. That's really the only choice you have. So what you want to do is be what we call centered as much as possible. Centered is an odd phrase that we use a lot. You say people, he has 2 feet on the ground, he's a grounded person. I kind of like centered because I think of it like a teeter-totter, right? Like a balancing scale. And centered means that all the weight is perfectly distributed and the thing is balanced. That's sort of how I think we should be. Usually, we have some sort of demon in us, no matter what it is. It could be someone likes pie too much. It could be someone wants to beat somebody up constantly because they just have that alpha male gene. They've never had any rite of passage. They feel the need to kill an animal, that instinctual thing that's still pounding mankind every time we wake up, right? All these bros in Southern California who walk around just waiting to be in a bar fight. All they are expert hunters with nothing to hunt. That's all it is, man. But we don't have any mechanism in society for them to do it besides going off and perhaps joining law enforcement, the military, or paintball. They have some sort of manual labor that they love, some artistic maybe labor that they can get into to just expel that energy. But usually it is a conquering gene sequence. It is, I am terrified. My bloodstream is going to fill with adrenaline to protect me. And I need to conquer that animal. I need to literally kill it. And that's just in our DNA. Now, the more that your son drinks soy, he's not going to have that problem. But this is what we have to do in terms of understanding ourselves to start to unlock this labyrinth, this Pandora's box, which is the id and the self and the ego. So how do you get in there? Because I could talk about character next, but character is sort of, that list of rules that you've made based on your life that you kind of haphazardly pick to determine who you are as an individual. And after a while, you start to find out what you like and what you don't like, and then you start to say, well, I'm not going to be around the stuff I don't like. I'm just tired of it. But I have to say, that's one of the talents that you start having in your 40s. If you really try, you can start saying, you know what, I've been listening to this music my entire life and letting people play this music around me, and you know what, I just don't like it. And just knowing you don't like it sometimes makes it tolerable. It's really interesting, right? You just at least understand why your heart sinks when you hear it, or whatever it is, right? So piercing your id and your ego and your true inner self is extremely challenging. And I'll tell you why I think it's really challenging. And that's because, again, when I said this thing was forming when you were in your mother's belly and, the first several years of your initial life, you don't have sentient access to that anymore, right? We don't remember being one day in and day out and day in and day out to the point where we're like, well, yes, when I was curious about the trash can in the kitchen and I climbed into it and I spilled all the stuff on the ground and my father picked me up and pounded my ass. I started to loathe my dad. This is what Freud probably had happened to him. Did not happen to me. So how do you go back and access who you are? Well, what do psychiatrists try to do? They try to get into you and regress you back through hypnosis. Hypnosis is very interesting because there was a huge trend in the 80s and early 90s where all these kids were trying to get a buck out of their parents. I'm not even sure they were aware of it. And the psychologists, psychiatrists that were doing this, I think were in it to make a buck as well, at least in several cases. But all these people were being hypnotized and would find out that their father molested them. Then we find out, because none of us had done regression research before these accusations started to pile up, and all these dads were, destroyed, and especially in little towns, if you got 10,000 or under and you're a father that's been accused of molesting your daughter, good luck getting any customer service anywhere. Good luck even walking into the door of anything that's in a massive corporation. Then we find out that a psychiatrist can lead you through anything they want you to repeat. They can lead the witness, as it were. But in this particular case, they're leading your chemical structure in your mind, almost like when you're on an LSD trip. If someone were to program you with words and then show you colors, they could start constructing something in your mind before it actually occurs. And so all these cases came out, and people destroyed their families. And what was crazy was some of the kids actually had the balls to say, look, I actually didn't know if what I was saying was true. The psychiatrist said it was, so I believed it, and they eventually backed out of the deal. And so I guess they didn't really molest me, and I don't really have a clear memory of it all, and I don't even remember being under. I just woke up and they said, this is what you said, and then I got all upset because, again, life didn't turn out the way they wanted to, and they wanted to find a source of their problems. So they went way, way back and started accusing whomever they could do it. And with the psychologist or psychiatrist that's going to actually make the association for you, you're screwed. So how do you do it without some crazy regression? We talk about fear every once in a while. And I want to propose that there's two beacons in everyday thought for each one of us. One is fear and one is love. I think that if you study the subatomic firing in your brain for something you don't like and something you do like, if you study how your brain reaches out to each one of those hemispheres of preference as things are presented to you, whether it be presented to you as an object in the real world, or it becomes a thought that you just simply had. Feel how you react to that. Because I think that is the sort of the straw down inside your indicator, down inside your ego and your id. If you will, just imagine two little wires coming out of that little ball. That is who you are, and one's blue and one's red. And blue is love and red is hate, or some derivative thereof, right? And as you feel yourself making judgments, having responses, you're going to start to reverse engineer the inside of your consciousness. And you're going to start to archaeologically dig out your mind. So what do you do when you start feeling yourself going back and forth on this thing? You start to feel, this technique starts to work, and you start to feel pleasure and pain. Once you can start identifying a 2-column list of things, and there's potentially one in the middle that you don't have any opinion of, and I would just say for now you don't really worry about anything you don't have a disposition towards, right? Don't worry about it. Go after love and hate. Once you start putting all the things in life in these 2 columns, you can then, again, step back. And if you want to, write it down. You can take each one of them. If you have the time, you can a la carte each one of these emotions. Stop literally what you're doing in the world and think about it. A couple things, very important, I think you might do with these 2 indicators. Again, you have a subject matter that's causing an emotion. One, there's an origin for that association. You might find value in trying to figure out, where did I have this opinion to begin with? Was it my parents that told me this was good? Was it society? Or did I just happen to bump into it? The other one is to say, how has my opinion of this thing changed my life? Everything you do in life is a billion tiny decisions. I mean, when you wake up, if you just started counting the thoughts that are going through your mind to get up and go to work in the morning, how you're going to go to work in the morning, how you're going to do your job at work, etc., till you go to sleep. You know it's based on a bunch of preferences. So you want to find out how the things that have been allowed into your ego and your id, your deep, deep core, which again is the directional mechanism. It's the steering wheel on your character. Your persona can only be a subset of what you allow your character to be. So it's important we go straight to the dead center of this thing. So again, we want to find out where we gain the preference, because finding out where you gain a preference of something positive or negative allows you to make a decision as to whether or not you keep it moving forward. I no longer feel bad about this, because I've understood that I don't like it, and I've understood that I don't like it simply because this event happened to me in my past. Food preferences are really amazing. Some situation surrounds a food option for you, and ends up being negative in the end. And so what do? You end up not liking the food. It has nothing to do with the taste of the food, the texture of the food, or whatever, this aroma. And then eventually you pull out of it. A lot of kids don't like sushi when you're young. A lot of people don't like sushi until they try it. And you have to go through certain levels of sushi to get to the point where you actually are cool with eating seaweed and raw fish. In the end, you start hating the fact you love sushi because it's full of Fukushima radiation and it costs a lot of money. Once you figure out something that's actually been crafting your life and changing the direction of your life, then you can choose consciously whether or not you want it to continue to affect you. Remember, Tony Robbins' whole thing is to say, let's attach pain to the things that are destroying your life, even though right now you might think it's making you happier. People who eat for comfort have to say, that food makes me feel good, but it also makes me fat, and I don't want to die young. I want to have complications. I don't want to have insurance problems. I don't want to have my body cut open constantly. I don't want to have strokes, heart attacks, anything. Diabetes. Dementia if you got toxins, right? Okay, so what Tony does is says, okay, you think you love this thing, but we're going to move it forward to what you're going to end up being in the end. And let's look at what that person looks like. And of course, no one likes that, so they attach a bunch of negativity to it, and then they reel it back and they start clobbering this faux positivity. And then they re-engineer the mind. And, the brain, I'll say it a million times, the brain gravitates to positivity. That's why when you get out of a horrible relationship, unless you're experiencing like that 1 in a million horrific thing, if it's just a normal relationship and you just had incompatibilities and a bunch of bad experiences due to those incompatibilities, as soon as the relationship's over, your brain refuses to hang on to those negative things. You find yourself 6 months, 2 years down the line going, what was wrong with them? Maybe it was me. And then you might go into a regret phase for a little while until maybe you hang out with them again and you get reminded of all the incompatibilities that you have. So I'm going to give you a scientific medical example of where the ego can affect your health. There's something out there called TMS, and it's got a horrific, real set of 3 words. If you look it up in the on the internet, you look up TMS, pain management. It's probably the best way to look at it. There's a lot of people out there with phantom back pain, and they're going to say it's real back pain. It is real back pain, and they have phantom muscle pain all over their body. And people, of course, if you ask a surgeon, first you talk to your general practitioner, tell them that you have all these ailments in your body. They're going to get paid for the referral. So they want the paycheck for referring you to their buddy who's already set up. They already have a relationship. They might even have 4 or 5 people that will bid on you. They say this person thinks they got back pain, so you might be able to get a little exploratory surgery out of them, maybe a disc replacement, how much you pay for it. And these guys will bid on it. Boom. Usually the guy who's hurting the most will pay the most, which means he's hurting because he's not a great physician most of the time, unless he's brand new and he's just trying to build up his clientele. You get referred off to that guy. And the way it would normally go is they do exploratory surgery. Well, exploratory surgery cuts flesh, it moves bone, it does all kinds of horrible things that when you heal, you have scar tissue and a bunch of inflammatory residual flesh that's trying to heal you, right? Okay. Well, a bunch of doctors who actually had some ethics said, you know what, we're not cutting you open. We've done an x-ray on you and there is nothing wrong with your bone structure. Your discs are in place, your bones look healthy, but we do believe you're having this pain. So let's work from that level. Long story short, the TMS pain clinics out there have reduced back pain surgery and other exploratory surgeries by 80+% by simply doing psychiatric regressions with these individuals, not suggesting that they were raped by their parents, but by saying, tell us about your past. And these reflection sessions, these deep psychological hypnosis sessions have been able to reveal that they have at least a belief that something from their past is haunting them, whether it be just insecurities about themselves personally or some abuse that took place, some abandonment issues that may have happened, etc., etc. Everything that it psychologically affects an individual, they found in these individuals, and then they simply started to treat them. They simply started giving them sessions to talk it out, to get angry, to cry, to realize that it's all in their past, and to cut off, again, the past equaling the future. Guess what? The pain went away in their bodies. Cool, right? So then they got curious, and they're like, well, okay, so we've now made this connection. People with deep psychological issues, which are very curable in most cases, are having these phantom pains all over their body. And so they're trying to figure out mechanically, how is this occurring? And what they discovered was the brain is unbelievable. All right. And this is, there's a lot of debate about whether or not you have a soul and whether or not the brain is just a gateway to it. Seems like there's a lot of evidence for that. Old souls and people that are born knowing their past. I mean, it's a couple different cases that are almost irrefutable. But putting that aside, they came to the conclusion that it worked like this. And they physically found the brain sending the messages to the body in a very particular way. When these past events were triggered by association, so maybe a person's scared of the dark and they're 55 years old, and for whatever reason they are still terrified of the dark, and they're embarrassed that they're scared of the dark. They don't even really care if anyone else knows. Darkness is everywhere. It happens every single night. Maybe if they get up early, it's maybe they open a closet and they're just freaked out of the dark. And it's some horrific thing that took place. Maybe a cat jumped out on them or something, right? For whatever reason, they just didn't lose the fear of the dark. So it gets triggered. So whatever the kernel event was, the first event that got them terrified, the one that they can't really look at because it's just too much, when it gets triggered by an everyday event, maybe they just see black, just a dark wall that's just really dark, and it just gives them that hint of a trigger. When that happens, what the psychologists and psychiatrists think is that here comes the dormant thought that causes this huge psychosis, right? It's coming at the conscious mind from the subconscious. They have electrically sensed this metabolism by watching the brain have a bunch of thoughts, and they watch the electricity as it goes through the brain, this path. And then here comes one based off the trigger, once they figured out through sessions. All of a sudden, the patient had pain. They said, where do you have this pain? Well, some people have pain in their arms and their chest and their back. And they found out that the brain was actually starving through muscle flexing all the oxygen in that part of the muscle tissue, creating essentially a cramp without perhaps maybe the big, where you contort and you can't control yourself, right? But the brain was trying to short circuit the conscious mind from ever having this subliminal horrific thought. Interesting, right? And the solution was to have the patient figure out who they were inside, to expel and exorcise by their own means, if possible, out these demons of their past that are stuffed inside their id and their ego. It's sort of an extreme example, but I guarantee you have met someone in your life who has that ailment, because it's extremely common. So now what if you don't have that? How do we create a daily ritual to get into self? That answer is very synonymous with the answer that you might give your child if they said, Mom, Dad, how do I get patience? And you smile and you're like, well, sit right there. Sit right there. And I'll tell you when you're done. And you just make them sit there, right? That's how you would teach someone patience. All right. Unfortunately, the answer of meeting yourself could be that dry. It's going to be based on what you've done with yourself to begin with. At the upper level, let's just say you have never had a moment of time to yourself. You keep yourself scheduled out weeks and years ahead. You plan cruises, you plan concerts, you plan everything, and you never have a breathing moment for yourself. You're going to have to start at the tippy top. It's almost like a pimple about to burst, right? It's a woman's water about to burst. You barely touch that baby and you're going to be hit really hard. Then there's some of you who have spent a decent amount of time drawing, painting, just observing life. Maybe you watch birds. Maybe you watch the ocean. Maybe you just sit on your patio and think. Maybe just smoke a cigar and you have no book, no pad and paper, no cell phone, nothing to distract you. But you just sit and you smoke and you get yourself a good long filler, good 2-hour cigar, and you just sit there thinking. Well, your step is pretty much continue what you're doing, really. Start going into very specific thoughts, perhaps. Try to split very specific atoms in your mind. Well, what do you think about this very heavy subject? Deep thoughts could be a great stimulant for those of you who are willing to smoke that cigar or sit in your backyard and do something. I'm trying to get you to smoke. Notice I'm not smoking today. But you are on advanced upper average level. You can do a lot of things. But if you're at that tippy top, the best thing you can be told is that this is going to be potentially a wonderful experience. But you're going to have to demonize in your mind, map the negativity to the perceived positivity of distraction. Social media has got to just utterly go down to nothing. If you're trying to convince a bunch of people online that your life is better than it really is, then you have no benefit to that anyway. Get your life as amazing as you want it to be. And then don't gloat to everyone about it constantly. I have friends that simply, Facebook is the big, let's pretend our life is better than it is thing. And you can get trapped in this. You can get trapped in this where some people are just so dumb they don't understand that that's what actually they're doing. But others know exactly what they're doing, but they wouldn't admit it to themselves, right? And then sometimes you do have a good life and you start posting things up there and you start getting these passive-aggressive replies from people, sort of saying, oh, well, the pretty people and blah, 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 blah. I've had every iteration of all of this. Okay. Distractions have to go away. You will not learn about self without spending time with self. That doesn't mean you have to do nothing. I find it valuable every once in a while to do nothing. It's almost like mental fasting. I don't do it for extended periods of time, but maybe like, again, a smoke, a couple hours smoke, and just sit and chill. And a lot of times I'll grab a pad and paper, the next step up. And I'll just pick a subject and I'll start riffing on it. That's how I get prepared for these deep thoughts with my life, is that I'll take a subject and just beat the living crap out of it on paper, or just think about it. And then if it's something you're interested in, you won't forget it. And so I flip on the camera. I don't need a script. I don't have anything posted up here that flags me or anything. And I can kick out a couple hours. One of the best ways to construct memories in your mind is through pictures. Just, a picture in a year. A picture in a year. Most of us remember our past that way anyway, right? You'll say, oh yeah, when I was 4, my mom did this, then I was 5. And you see the pictures of it happening in your mind with the years underneath. We'll just take all of life and make it like that. It's really actually pretty fun. Now the next step up, and some of our viewers have done this, and I want to give big props to Jared because he has inspired me. One of our listeners really got back into art, and he started sketching. He actually posted a sketch of me he did up there, which was really cool. And he was the one that painted himself and made it his profile. And I'm sitting there looking at this, and I just happened to stumble into painting in my life, and he was doing that, and I was like, man, this is good. We're on the same level, but, on the same frequency of life. And as I understand, he's getting into writing now, which is my love of life, right? So I guarantee you, when he's doing that, he is meeting himself. He is meeting the mortality of himself. He's meeting the fear of failing. You start a painting and you're like, I hope this thing turns out the way I got it in my mind. But he's willing to go through and be courageous in that process. One of our guys, Lance, he builds these medieval helmets. And again, I guarantee you, when he buys all this equipment and puts it together, especially for the very first time, you just have butterflies in your chest. You may have confidence that you're going to continue going, but you don't know if it's a 5-year project or a 5-week project, but you know that you're going to keep going in your mind until you make it happen. So one of the ways I want to suggest before this thing is over to really learn who you are and to have a great time doing it is to get a hobby of any kind. And definitely get a hobby that I would say has 2 qualities to it. One, a hobby where you must create by yourself. You can have other ones too, where you develop completely in a community in a collaborative way. Those are beautiful for the mind and beautiful for the soul, and that's what we need to do as human beings, is collaborate, make the whole planet better, right? But you have to have something where you go off and paint, or it doesn't have to be that. You could write poetry, you could read books, you could write books, you could do whatever you do. Try to do something you've never done. Don't be a chicken shit. Get out there and do something that you've never done, and you know what? You can do it in secrets, and nobody knows if you fail. If you want to learn how to play an instrument, hey man, there's electric guitars where you can put the plug in the back, put headphones on, and no one really knows how bad you're playing until you get good at it. Same thing with the keyboard. Just get yourself a little keyboard, put the headset on. No one has to know how bad you are. If that's a concern of yours, right? And, there's some people that just don't give an F, right? They're just like pounding away. They don't care. And good for them, man. I wish I was more like that. But that's the first quality of your hobby, is to have it be something you create on your own. Second level up is to have the collaborative community around you to then take it to. I've painted with a friend of mine paintings at a place that you paint as adults at night. And you have 2 hours. They pick a picture that they want you to copy, and you're encouraged to do your own thing. But this is sort of the template. So for 2 hours, you're sweating bullets trying to make something interesting, and especially with me, it's just nerve-wracking to make it really creative and flip the script, flip the color palette, flip the composition, flip the structure. And then at the end, we all compare our paintings, and I swear to God, I see these brilliant painters, and I go up to them and I say, "Are you a painter? Like, this looks phenomenal." And people go, "No, not really. I just come here to paint." I'm like, you need to be a painter, okay? Because if that's what you're capable of doing at this place in 2 hours, you with a week and a 10-foot canvas by 10 foot, I'll buy it off of you. Just create something cool. And if you need me to spark you with the subject, I will do so, But it's interesting how people have these amazing talents and they have no idea. And they spiritually get uplifted every time they do it. But they feel like they have to have an apparatus tell them to do it. Friends have to invite them to the paint party before they do it. You can do it by yourself. And sometimes that's the most intimate, wonderful thing ever. If you're a parent, I stress with you, let your kid sit in their room and create some sort of skill to write, to paint, to draw, to even just sit in there and imagine with toys. Becoming a storyteller happens first through experience, through figuring out story arcs with your little characters, right? And a lot of parents, shut this down because they're like, you're being weird, you're talking to yourself, or you're being antisocial with the rest of the family. No, your job as a parent from the day they're born to the 18 years old is to drive as many talents and hobbies into your kids, usually hobbies that are productive, that actually have some inkling of becoming employable later. And if nothing else, if they understand the idea behind art, they're going to succeed in life way better than if they sit in a vacuum their whole life. You're these kids that get to 18 and try to figure out what their major is, and they have no clue. It's because they have no idea who they are. And today it's as bad as it could possibly be. There's this movie coming out about Steve Jobs, and I talk about him, and I have my own admiration for the guy, but he was a very mortal human being. He made gigantic mistakes with his life, just like anybody, and you wouldn't want to copy everything that he did in life. But one of the things he did that was very interesting was he kept his house almost void of any furniture. And there was a very interesting thing that someone said, which is like, they came over to interview him and he didn't have a sofa. And they said, "Why don't you have a sofa?" And he goes, "Well, what do you do on a sofa?" And they go, "Oh, I get it. You basically sit on your ass all the time and don't do anything." And so he kept a desk chair and a desk and a computer. And eventually he did break once he started having kids that he was readily claiming as his own children. But that's an interesting way to say you can discipline your life. If you're totally single, man, the power that you have to craft your world at home, to get rid of all the elective stuff, it could be as simple as you've got too many television shows you're addicted to. It could be you've got too many websites that you visit on a daily basis. It could be you're too addicted to your telephone. It could be that every time someone posts something on Instagram or Facebook or something else, you feel compelled to immediately address it. If your cell phone rings, you feel compelled to immediately answer it. Stop letting the world control you like that. You have to make conscious decisions. It could be someone you really like on the phone. It's really funny. I've got, I'll make an admission here. I work with some of my childhood idols. Unbelievable I worship them. They were utterly famous to me, and they still are to this day. But because I work for them now and work with them on various projects, my phone will ring, right? And their name comes across the caller ID. And I think, my God, if 20 years ago my phone rang with this person's name on it, I would utterly cut through a crowd to get to that phone to answer, to hear their voice. And now, since we'll end up talking like 5 times in a day when something's going on, sometimes I can't do it. I'm about to jump in the shower, and I'm not going to take the phone call to say I'm jumping in the shower and hang up, so I just jump in the shower, do my thing, and call them afterwards. But I'm actually letting phone calls go to voicemail that I would have never done 20 years ago. It's weird, right? So you can create a perspective to control your life. Take it back. And I know a lot of you already do all this stuff, and you do have a great control of your life. So, if I'm just affirming you, then 2 thumbs up to you, man. But try to get to a point. I didn't talk about meditation right? And I don't even want to mention the word, because as soon as you start going, well, what you guys got to do is get yourself in a lotus position, go home, stimulate your glandular structure with that tone, and then you'll start being one with yourself and the universe. If you're aware of that, then you can do that, and that will definitely heighten your awareness. But that's going to be on such an existential level. There's no way we can cover it in this episode without starting out saying existentialism is the name of this episode, right? But this one's called Self. And just remember, I'm just going to repeat this before I sign off. You can't control who you become if you don't control who you are at the deepest, darkest levels of your being. Don't see it as a negative. See it as a positive. See it as the Valley of the Kings is completely undug, and you are the first person hired to go in there, and there's no archaeological class yet. You got little picks. You got a whole crew of Arabs are going to help you dig this stuff out, but they're waiting for you to give the first sign, and you're going to start just saying, carefully start digging, right? And everything that's dug up, you're going to explore it. You're going to look at it with the first human eyes, and, who knows, 30,000 years for some of these guys, right? That's your id. That's your ego. And believe me, your id and ego is far more interesting than any tomb in Egypt. So carefully, slowly, with total excitement in your system. If you haven't been there in a while, go take a look. Enjoy the process. Understand you're getting more control over yourself in the end. That's all I got for you on this one. As always, mkultraradio.com. Subscribe if you dig it. Like if you dig it. Go back to the old episodes. There's a lot in there. Be good to yourself. Be good to someone else. And we'll see you in the next episode. Over now.